This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
Greetings, Dogpo Nation, and welcome to the Two Green Browns podcast with myself, Neil Dunworth. And today I am joined by Nathan Santo from the Seahawks Nest podcast. How are you today, Nathan?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm very, very good. Thanks very much for joining us today. Obviously, this is going to be a preview. As always, we are based on the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. So if anybody out there is looking for any sports podcast, any true crime, any basically anything at this stage, I think there's over 60 podcasts on the network there. Guys, you can find on the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Before we get into this, we are just going to pause very, very briefly for an ad promo from the Big Heads Media Podcast Network, but we'll be right back in the next 30 seconds to discuss with Nathan.
Want to know what life is really like after the game's all over? Real athletes are here to share their true stories of adversity and triumph every week on After Orange Slices. Even if you don't like sports, pro athletes, former college stars, celebrities, coaches, public speakers, doctors, and all kinds of experts join the show, and there's a little bit of something for everybody. Join me, Bridget, for a slice of inspiration, plus your everyday sports news sprinkled in. New episodes every Friday at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, available anywhere you get your podcasts.
So, hey, Nathan, once again, we're back again after that short ad promo. So we are here today to talk about the Seattle Seahawks' formidable opponent for the Cleveland Browns this week. And as always, we like to look across enemy lines just to see what the camp feels like in Seattle today. So I suppose really no better place to start off, Nathan, than maybe just giving us a rundown on how you feel the offseason went.
Okay, so I mean the Seahawks this year, I think a lot of us were worried about will the Seahawks pass or run, right? The Seahawks had a reputation last year as the most pass-heavy team in the NFL, and so a lot of Seahawks fans I think were really worried that hey, we're going to come in with this super run-heavy game plan, and then after that first week against the Bengals, I think people were even more worried because we slipped by them and didn't throw at all. In that 21-20 win. But then since then, we've started really cutting it loose. Right now, we're number one in the league in DVOA passing. And I think that's kind of been the story of the offseason is we drafted DK Metcalf. Will Dissly came back from his injury. Russell Wilson's putting up those MVP numbers, I think. So it's just been a really exciting kind of start to the season for Seahawks fans so far.
Yeah, and you mentioned there, it is a case of will the Seahawks actually, and sometimes for opposing fans, sometimes it's a case of will the Seahawks utilize Russell Wilson, the absolutely unbelievably talented quarterback. Obviously, you've got Brian Schottenheimer in there who seems to have developed a run at all costs mentality last year. And it was kind of a case of, as you mentioned, what are we going to do this year? Is it going to be run or is it going to be pass? Do you think you found a healthy balance of it? Obviously, looking at some of the stats there, you've got Chris Carson. He had a great game against the Rams, and he's on about 380 plus, I think, yards for the season. Has the balance been found?
I think that we're close, and especially if you look at the first half versus the second half, I think that the thing the Seahawks didn't understand is they had this idea in their heads. And I think Ben Baldwin is a Seahawks writer that wrote about this for The Athletic. And his idea is that the teams that win a lot of games, they have a lot of rushes. But it's because they're running at the end of the game, not at the beginning of the game, right? You're running out the clock. And I think that the Seahawks kind of figured that out this year is that, hey, let's start by passing. Let's get off to a hot start, and then we'll run a lot at the end, pound the ball when we're ahead, control the clock once we get a lead. And so it's a much more – the offense flow makes a lot more sense, and it isn't quite so, we're just going to keep running into Dallas's front eight over and over like in the playoff game last year.
And, obviously – you mentioned there that running is most of the winning teams do run and when they're running and so on. And I suppose really I'd love to know if there was numbers. I haven't looked into it myself, but I'd love to know if there was numbers to see, I suppose directional run processes and stuff like that. Obviously, obviously it's to do with scheme and so on, but I can see I did a small little bit of research on the Seahawks. I watched the last 2 games. I can see that the team's runs seem to be very, very spread out. They don't seem to favor running any particular direction. The Browns tend to run to the left all the time. But I have seen that there is a tendency for this team to run behind the right tackle, run between the right guard and the center an awful lot. And that will kind of bring me on to the offensive line. It's always been a kind of an area for the Seahawks that they may have, I won't say struggled in, but they may have tried to get creative in,
Mm-hmm. I mean, people act like the Seahawks haven't spent a lot of capital on their offensive line, but our center's a 3rd-round pick. Our left guard, we traded a 1st-round pick for. Our right tackle is a 1st-round pick. Our left guard is a top 10 pick. Like they're significant talent level. It's just we haven't been able to get anything out of the talent. Our Tom Cable was our offensive line coach, and I think most people that are Seahawks fans would agree he did a terrible job of like getting these guys to play better, especially once they changed the rules so you couldn't cut block all the time. Like that rule change just like tanked him. He was no good after that. And so the Seahawks, like we spent all this effort trying to make a good offensive line. It didn't happen. And now it's just there's one gaping black hole, which is our right tackle, Jermaine Ifedi, is he's leading the league in pressures allowed right now. So he's pretty questionable, but the other 4 guys have been great. Last week, I don't know if you said you watched last week's game. Our backup guard came in. His name's Jamarco Jones, and he had like a super great game. He held kind of Aaron Donald and Michael Brockers in check, and there's like a couple great Twitter threads out there. That guy's looking like he's might be pretty good for us, and I'm excited about 4 of the guys on the offensive line. The one guy scares me, but the thing that makes up for it is Chris Carson. You said it before. He's super talented. He's 3rd in the league right now in broken tackles, behind just Kamara and Christian McCaffrey, which I mean, those are the guys you'd expect to be at top. But he breaks a lot of tackles. He makes guys miss. He gives us the flexibility, like you said, to run any direction. One thing that's looked different about the Seahawks offense this year is that we play shotgun a lot more. So like before, Russell Wilson would always line up under center, and then this year it's like he hardly ever runs up under center, which I think helps him a lot because he's short. Because if you line up under center when you're that short, you have to drop back really far to make the pass, which gives the defensive lineman a lot of time to get to you. Whereas now he can just get, read the defense, get out the pass. He doesn't have to do so much work just to get the pass out.
And that there may be, obviously we don't exactly have a giant at our quarterback either as well, and he's coming for a small bit of hassle really recently, should I say, with holding on to the ball for too long. But he does have a couple of 7 and 10 and 45 yard step drops nearly at this stage to try and get back from the offensive line. But then he breaks the pocket a small bit as well, so he's seen ghosts. And I think when you look at Russell Wilson, I think something that's almost become a sign, a kind of a staple of him over the last couple of years is his composure within the pocket, and the fact that he doesn't need to break the pocket as much anymore. But being in shotgun, I suppose, would allow him to that kind of afford him that kind of protection as well. And you mentioned about Jamarco Jones as well. Wouldn't it just be typical that you mentioned he came in last week and that an Ohio State product would come in and up against Olivia Vernon or Myles Garrett. And
that's something I know. What you said about Baker Mayfield, like kind of taking longer drops and doing stuff like that, is one thing I look up always is like who on the opposing team gave up the sacks. Like that's something that Pro Football Focus will track. And 4 of the 13 sacks this season, they credited to Baker Mayfield. They said it was like Baker's fault that he got sacked, basically. Like the drop was too far. He rolled out into an area where he probably shouldn't have. And that stuff is like Russell Wilson used to do that stuff all the time. So I'm just going to say, write it out. That stuff is like brutal, but he'll figure it out because the good ones do. And that I think that's something Russ had to figure out over time. Is like he had so many early career sacks where he'd take a sack where he just dropped back way too far, and then he'd roll out to the outside, and the defensive end would have an easy time releasing from the tackle and just making the play, and it'd just be so frustrating. But that's something you got to kind of feel out. You got to learn it.
That's interesting. So if anybody listening to this podcast takes nothing else away, take away that Nathan has just said there, that next year, like Baker Mayfield is going to be as good as Russell Wilson.
I don't think that's impossible. One thing, I have a question for you. Since you follow the Browns closer than me, I know that like early season, Greedy Williams was looking really good, and then he got injured. Is he going to be back this week?
It's touch and go. He's back in full. They were limited yesterday, limited today. So it depends, I suppose, really on what happens. Himself and Denzel Ward. There was a spate of hamstring injuries. There was like 3 or 4 of them in our defensive back room, all after the Jets game, and it was really strange situation. There was one, I think, in the Jets game, Morgan Burnett. And then there was 2 in training all on the same day. So there was 3 all on the same day. Yeah, Sheldrick Redwine went down as well. But we seem to have we've had everybody in practice for the first time since the Tennessee game, including right tackle Kendall Lamb, which we didn't think. Like, I thought that he was when he went down injured, thought he was gone for the season. It looked a nasty knee injury, but he seems to have shaken it off and come back, which is going back to the offensive line, which is kind of big for the Browns, because it gives them a bit of flexibility to maybe, get in that extra lineman in there for blocking. Because if you look at the 49ers game, we had tight ends basically shaping up one-on-one with Nick Bosa, and it was not pretty. And
well, like I watched most of that game because all I needed, I was in my fantasy game, all I needed was Baker Mayfield to score like 1 touchdown and I would win. And so I had to watch basically the whole game, and I was just like but teams hardly ever look that bad. Like, that was just a perfect storm of like everything went wrong in that game. It's the kind of game you just have to kind of burn the tape, like walk away. You can't overthink it, because if you start to overthink that game, like, you're just done for. I think everything went wrong.
I think you are right, definitely, and that's the kind of conclusion in the cold light of day over the last couple of days that I've come to. It was a bad day at the office, and everything just went wrong. It was a case of go home, go to sleep, wake up the next day, and everything would be right. Because, like, when you see, and I got, in our podcast, I was kind of, it sounded like I was calling out Joe Batonio, and it couldn't be further from the truth. What I kind of meant, and I suppose for clarification for anyone listening to this, was when you see Joe Batonio go backwards, the offensive line is having a bad day, because he's just such a top guard that if he's getting pushed back, the cohesion of the whole unit isn't there. So it was just one of those things, as I say, against the Ravens. That stuff wasn't happening. We were getting the ball out a bit earlier. Baker was getting protected. But then again, there's a lot of teams going to struggle with this 49ers front 4 as well, because they're all first-round picks. They're all damn good players as well.
They're all like top 10 picks too. Like they had a bunch of picks in the top 10, and they used them all to get just like DeForest Buckner, Eric Armstead, Nick Bosa, Solomon Thomas. Like, these guys they just picked all these guys right in a row. And then this year they switched to a 4-3, so they get to put them all on the field at the same time, which is probably pretty smart. I think that's a good move. The San Francisco thing is weird, because I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is very good, but then the rest of their team is awesome and their coach is good. So it makes up for a lot of my doubt about their quarterback. It's like the opposite I feel about your team. No offense, I don't mean to offend you, but it's like I feel really strongly about how talented the players on your team are, but the coaching doesn't inspire confidence in me, especially after watching last week. Maybe that's like poisoned me a little bit, though. Just that one bad performance.
You know what? That's a fair assessment. It's a fair assessment that the cohesion isn't there, and if the cohesion isn't there, there is quite an awful lot of talent there, but the identity hasn't formed itself yet. Even in preseason, the identity there was flashes of brilliance. It's been like that as well, bar the last week's game. In every game, there's been kind of like a flash of something great happening. We're struggling to get OBJ into the game. And that's something I suppose I'll talk about more when we get to the Seahawks defense in a moment. But struggling to get OBJ in the game, and when you are, I suppose there's like the one thing with the NFL is there's a lot of voices all the time. Somebody's talking to you about something, somebody's talking at you about something, somebody's probably giving you shit at some stage, regardless whether it's in the middle of the game, whether it's after a game, whether it's before the game, whether it's in practice. And I think the fact that if you've got such a highlight player in OBJ, now it's kind of becoming like you hear Colin Cowherd going, "Oh, the Browns should trade OBJ." Like, it's just relentless the amount of attention.
He gets a lot of attention, yeah.
That's
Exactly.
it. Yeah, he gets a lot of attention, and he's not a bad guy. He really, like, literally, I would have been, before he joined the Browns, I would have kind of maybe not taken as much notice. I would have only seen what the national media had, and now there's scrutiny on him. He's a really, really well-spoken guy. He's well behaved.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't take the bait on any questions and so on. And yeah, I think he's a bit misunderstood.
He reminds me a bit of like Cam Newton in that way. I think Cam Newton catches a lot of stick for basically no reason, just because people don't think because he hates losing. So he's kind of mad at when he loses. And Odell's the same way, man. He hates losing, and he's going to start getting angry and frustrated when the losses pile up and the bad plays happen. Like, he gets mad, and you know what? I mean, that's annoying, but you want your players to want to win, right? Like, it's not a bad quality to have, to be super competitive.
And it was so funny, but funny / kind of eye-opening, really, with him in his last in interview he gave yesterday, actually. That was today. Your guys today, my yesterday.
Exactly.
Because for anybody who doesn't know, it's 4:55 a.m. in the morning, just as I'm speaking right now. But luckily, I'm an early riser. But he gave an interview, and he said that because obviously we played the first game, our first play out of the blocks, it was a trick play, and Odell had a pass. But he said that he was disgusted with himself that just as he was releasing the ball, he could see Callaway on a burner route just down the field, completely open, with no coverage behind him or anything like that. And he said that he was disgusted that he didn't heave the ball down the field to Callaway. It would have been a guaranteed touchdown. So he'd gotten 20 yards. I think it was 22 yards to Landry.
Yeah.
He was disgusted that he didn't say, right, why didn't I take the shot downfield?
He's a good
picked up on that.
He's a good thrower too.
He absolutely is. He heaved 165 yards down, and Damien Ratley nearly caught it against the Ravens as well. But he's a really good thrower. But the thing is, no one picked up on that. And then after he'd said it, about 45 minutes later, there's about 5 articles on it going, look at this, OBJ should have hit Callaway in coverage. And going, he told you he should have done this. You guys didn't unearth this as journalists / media or whatever. So yeah. It can be quite frustrating for him sometimes that, that he's quite knowledgeable. He does love the game. When you hear him talking about it, he's got a good passion for the game. And as you say, sometimes that goes for you, sometimes that goes against you, and it gets you the wrong press that you want. So I suppose you guys have in a wide receiver room for Seattle. Probably, well, I won't say probably. It must have been a big blow for you guys so late in the offseason to lose Doug Baldwin. But
yeah, I mean, the thing is, Doug is that he's so perfect for Russ, right? He's always open. He never quits on the play. He's really good at setting up in spots in the zone and doing all the little things that help Russ, with the longer extended plays like he likes to do. But at the end of the day, I mean, I really like Doug Baldwin. Just as I met him before, and he's really cool, a really good person. So I'm glad that he picked like quality of life over, he just had injuries every year. And I mean, DK's been good. I think Jaron Brown is pretty underrated, like our other outside receiver. And then the tight ends, Will Dissly and Luke Wilson, kind of have been making up for some of that too. Dissly's been fantastic so far this year. Like one of the kind of, I think, like rising young players in the NFL. He's already hit, I think he's got two touchdowns and like 19 catches, and he's been really, really, really good.
And considering
more touchdowns, 4. I was like off by half there. So
you guys traded away Nick Vannett as well, so that means that seems to be a good vote of confidence in Dissly as well, that he's going to get the job done for you guys.
I mean, Seahawks fans are very cocky about the RGM, like the John Schneider. People talk him up so much. I mean, you've probably seen a picture of him with the shirt off on Twitter, or like with that championship belt. You've seen that picture before, I bet, because Seahawks fans post that thing everywhere. And I mean, he traded away Nick Vannett, a player I think most Seahawks fans think was like, okay, he's decent, decent player, get a 5th round pick, then sign Luke Wilson, who's just as good as Nick Vannett. So he basically got a 5th round pick for doing nothing, right? And Luke Wilson already knows our whole offense. He's been here for years. He's kind of a returning player. So I thought it was really just super great. Like it's a classic John Schneider move to just like leak out a little bit of value everywhere. Just get more value, more late round picks, just stock them up, It's a very John Schneider thing to happen. So Seahawks defense. Okay. So a lot of people in the past have thought Seahawks our defensive team. And this defense has been okay this year, but it's not the defense that I think people expect when they think about the Seahawks. The offense has been much better than the defense so far this year. And we still have really good players. Jadeveon Clowney obviously is excellent. He's been really good stepping in, playing. He already has 19 pressures. Quentin Jefferson actually has really stepped up with Jaron Reed got suspended for something he did 4 years ago. So a classic Goodell move.
Yeah.
But Quentin Jefferson's got 24 pressures already this year, which is just kind of an insane amount. So that's a guy that maybe Browns fans don't know about that you might hear his name a couple times. He's been really good so far this season. He plays kind of inside and outside, kind of the same way we used to use Michael Bennett, how he'll like play inside on passing downs and outside on rushing downs kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And then obviously Bobby Wagner's good, stuff like that. But I do worry. I do worry this week. Just the way that our corners and safeties and the way that the Seahawks like to keep 3 linebackers on the field a lot. Last week they did it less because the Rams kind of force your hand, but against you guys have 3 pretty good wide receivers that you can put on the field at the same time if Callaway doesn't drop passes like last week. But like the Callaway, OBJ, and Landry, that's tough for if one of those guys is singled up on a linebacker, Baker Mayfield's going to find that guy. And other teams have been doing that to the Seahawks all year. KJ Wright's been targeted 34 times this year already for 25 catches. Michael Kendricks has been targeted 19 for 18 catches. Bobby Wagner's been targeted 25 times and given up 21 catches. Those guys are the 3 of the top 4 most targeted players on our defense in terms of getting targeted by passes. So and those are our linebackers. So it's like people are searching out those matchups against us. So that's like the thing I'm most scared of against the Browns is that, if you guys come with a good game plan and focus on those linebackers and pick apart those matchups, the soft middle part of the field is really open against the Seahawks. And it's terrifying a lot of the time, but you got to work quick. So like, I know I've watched a couple of games from you guys this year, and Baker Mayfield likes to extend the play, roll out. That stuff doesn't work super good against the Seahawks. You want to like hit quick over the middle and beat the linebacker matchup. So
good. I like to hear that because if it's anything that would force Baker's hand to stay in the pocket and not roll to the right, would be good. So like it's kind of one of those things. Hopefully he knows that going into the game, and hopefully the coaching can figure that out. But if that is the case, I think that will play into our hands because he's a much better quarterback when he slings it, when he lets it go quickly. When he doesn't have to kind of get out into the scramble play. Now he can still scramble. I think there's a lot of hyperbole over Baker and the term regression and all this kind of stuff. He's playing with a whole new quartet. Realistically, has been in the first 5 games, a quartet of wide receivers, players they wouldn't be very familiar with, bar Landry. Now you mentioned the Landry, Callaway, Odell Beckham. I don't think that would be the starting 3 should we have it. I think we are going to play an awful lot of 11 personnel, but I don't think that would be the starting 3. I think we'll have Rashard Higgins back from injury, and
he's good too.
Oh yeah, he's Baker Mayfield's hot water bottle. Like he keeps him warm because he keeps the chains moving. He doesn't drop the ball. Rashard Higgins is as dependable as you get. He's in a contract year. He signed his tender this year. I think it was an original round tender or something. I think that's what it was, or 3rd round tender. But he's going to get paid. If it isn't in Cleveland, he's going to get paid somewhere. He's going to get some decent money because he is really, really dependable. And 2 years ago, we cut him and brought him back because we had an injury crisis, and he's flourished from there on in. But watch out for Higgins. If he's good to go, he was a kind of a game time decision last week where he didn't play because he's had a knee injury, and they kind of held him out, I think, because they didn't want to. Obviously, you don't want to mess with somebody's knee, but it was a game time decision really, and he was marked inactive last week. But I'm really excited about him coming back because himself and Baker, I think he actually lived with Baker all last year, Baker and Baker's now wife. He lived with him to gain a level of understanding with him. They actually lived together for a period of time. So
nice.
They even went down that route. But look, it's. I think that's going to be exciting. But I think your defensive back room. I'm looking through it here, and I see that it's probably fair to say if you're playing three linebackers and being in base defense an awful lot, obviously, look, are you really ever in base defense when you've got coverage linebacker like Bobby Wagner? You know, he's phenomenal. But his grades mightn't be as good this year so far through 5 games as or 4 games or 5 games or whatever it is, as he normally is. But I see that maybe there seems to be a lack of a nickel cornerback there within the.
Yeah, we have Jamar Taylor.
We know about him,
which I think you know about him. Yeah, he used to be on the Browns. My review of him is he's just super average. Like, he's fine. He's not like, but he gives up big plays and then makes up for them with a good play. And it's like, I don't know if I like that. That's not like the kind of average I like. I kind of like the steady hand where you never notice him. Not the like, hey, I gave up a touchdown and then got a really good pass breakup. That stuff drives me nuts. So that, I think that's why he's only played 84 snaps so far this year of the 320 that the defensive snaps that we've played. So he's not on the field a ton. Like I said, like, we just don't throw extra guys out there. And when we do, sometimes it's a safety. Like, we put out a safety or we'll put out like an extra. So we have a strong safety, Lano Hill. He's pretty good. And he comes out and plays quite a bit as like a third linebacker hybrid safety guy. And he's pretty decent. But a lot of our secondary guys are young, you know, so we have like second year and third year guys, except for Bradley McDougald, which I think McDougald's really solid. He's a really good safety, but he's like the adult in the room. Everyone else is in their second or third year. And Shaquille Griffin has kind of been back to what he was like when he was a rookie, really like dependable coverage guy. But he's not, I don't know if he's a true number 1 corner. And against a guy like Odell Beckham, I mean, he's going to be open sometimes against Shaquille. It's just going to happen because he just doesn't have that like elite ability, I think, to be like a true number 1. He's more like a 1.5. You know, he's like almost good enough, but not quite.
Yeah, it's kind of like I think, regardless, I think if Greedy and Denzel are ready to go, you guys are going to see an awful lot of TJ Carey, and you're going to see an awful lot of Money Mitch, Terrence Mitchell as our 2 cornerbacks. And I think that's how I describe them as well. They're probably a 1.5, both of them. But they're very serviceable in the pass game. Like, they had superb games against the Ravens. So what you're saying there is, even though they've both played tons of games in the NFL, it's not as if they've been they haven't played in the NFL. So you know, that's one thing that I would say about our defensive back room. It's been ravaged with injuries really recently, and we're kind of coming back to form again. But you know, even if we don't have Greedy Williams or Denzel Ward back, we'll still have 2 kind of experienced heads. Now, saying that TJ Carey is very handsy, and when I look at, like, obviously, I don't think we want Tyler Lockett anywhere near him.
Tyler Lockett's really good. I think people kind of slept on him, but that catch last week woke everyone up. I think everyone had to kind of realize, like, this is a real guy. He's really a number 1 wide receiver. I mean, he had a perfect passer rating last year on passes thrown to Tyler Lockett. They were perfect. They were perfect for the whole season, which is just insane. 158.3 was the passer rating. That's nuts. That's insane.
I have him on 3 of my 4 fantasy teams as well.
Yeah, so you knew.
Yeah, I knew. Yeah, he's pretty good. But yeah, him on, if TJ Carey and him getting any matchups at any stage, I just don't think that the Tyler Lockett would suit him. But Terrence Mitchell, yes, maybe so. I think Tyler Lockett and Greedy Williams, or Tyler Lockett and Denzel Ward, should I say, are a perfect match for each other. I think that would be electric to see that if that was to happen. But DK Metcalf, obviously the workout warrior that we saw in the combine last year, maybe. What's your initial thoughts on him? He's okay. No, he's caught in the blocks. Okay,
he's been all right. He's got 2 touchdowns. He's got the 12 catches, 267 yards. He's on pace for like 850 yards and 7 touchdowns, which would I think be a pretty great rookie season. I think most people would take that. The thing for me that's impressed me the most, though, is the level of trust Russell Wilson has for him. DK gets a lot of like 50-50 balls thrown his way, and Russell like completely trusts him to like to like make a play or at least knock the ball down so he doesn't get an interception, you know, just to do something make a play on the ball, which is, I think it's a good sign. That Russ trusts him so much, because there are other guys that we've had before playing the X wide receiver where Russ will hardly ever throw to them, like doesn't look their way, but like DK gets a healthy amount of targets and looks really good. And like I said, Jaron Brown, like this guy, I know he hasn't done much this season, the 8 catches for 116 yards, but like he's like underrated, and I think the team wants to get him more involved. he was hurt the first couple of weeks, and I think they want to get him kind of involved in the passing game. So I'd like keep an eye out for him.
Yeah, and he's got a freakish level from memory. Jaron Brown is a freakish level. I think he's like 6'2". He's about 207
Yeah,
he's
6'3". Yeah, he's a big guy.
And he can he ran a 4.4. But like I think was it he didn't run sub 4.4, did he? Or
no, I don't think just not quite, but he's numbers. Fast.
Yeah. It's like he's got one of those freakish. I think he's got something like if you look at his statistical analysis, I think he comes in somewhere near physical makeup and stuff like that, like a Josh Gordon in that kind of way. So he's kind of pretty athletic from that point of view. That's all.
The college tape just wasn't really that good, but he did run exactly a 4.4 at Clemson's pro day. Yeah, but he just wasn't he didn't do a lot in college, didn't have the college level production. So he was an undrafted free agent for Arizona, and then he's kind of stuck around for a long time. But he's like a guy that I just have a feeling. I've just been hyping him up all year, so I'm going to spread it to your podcast too. Yeah. But what's your expectation for this game? What do you think's what's your expectation?
I said this on the last podcast, our last preview podcast that we did with the 49ers guy, and the Cleveland Browns are very Jekyll and Hyde. I still haven't actually. I didn't Google whether Jekyll was the good guy or Hyde was the good guy. I can never remember which one it is.
I think it's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So I think Hyde's the bad guy. Yeah, Hyde's the monster. So wait, that might be the better one for football though. You might want to be the monster.
Yeah, maybe we do need that potion to turn him into the monster, exactly. But that's the way it is. You really won't know if this Browns team gets up on any team. They can be pretty dangerous. If they're chasing the game, they don't seem to have it. It's going to be a real perfect storm. If you start to see long developing routes like trips, they're against the Rams, they must have ran almost 4 verts quite a lot, which is really frustrating. And Baker was getting pummeled in that game. Now most quarterbacks will against the Rams, but I suppose my overarching feeling for this is, like you mentioned, there's a guy called Jake Burns who does an awful lot of video breakdowns for Browns Twitter and stuff like that. He came down the same side as yourself. If you can hit him over the middle, if you can maybe get him behind their linebackers, get maybe matchups with the linebackers and Odell, I think we're going to see an awful lot of Odell in the slot to try and get him into the game, number one. And obviously, if he's in the slot, maybe underneath routes to him, quick routes or quick passes to him from Baker Mayfield to try and get the two of them hot together would be good. It would be nice to see because it really hasn't happened. Obviously, you've got Jarvis Landry there as well. There's been calls quite a lot as well for now that Callaway is back for go 4 wide receiver sets and just completely I'm
not super into that, but I mean maybe someone likes it. I don't want to be I went to Washington State University, so I've watched a lot of 4 wide receiver sets and mesh plays and stuff like that. And I'm just gonna say I don't think that stuff will work in the NFL super good. Yeah. But that's just my opinion. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was surprised. So I always look up where players play in positions, and I was surprised to see Odell had 66 slot snaps already this year and plays about a quarter of the time in the slot. I thought that was pretty interesting. Yeah. The Rams do that too, where they just kind of play all their wide receivers in different positions, and it kind of messes with the defense. So that's something I was looking into last game, and the Seahawks handled it okay. Good enough to win barely. I expect this game to be pointsy and similar to last week's game the Seahawks played, where it's just I'm gonna be feeling it in my stomach the whole game. The game's gonna be close, and there's gonna be lots of points, so I'm gonna be freaking out the whole game. That's kind of my expectation for the game.
I think it's going to be under 46 points. I don't know. I think it's going to be
really
I think it's going to be something 24-21.
Oh man, I went way high. I think I went 33-27 or something like that. I went really high on my guess on our podcast.
I'm probably a bit gun shy. I think that's what it is at the moment, that I'm hoping other teams don't score an awful lot on us, but I'm also not really confident that our team will score an awful lot as well just after last week. But I could be completely wrong.
It could be
the same for the Ravens, that it was going to be a close enough game, and then that came out for what? 41 points or something.
Yeah, and Nick Chubb ran wild. That's the thing, is it is kind of difficult to run on the Seahawks. It's a lot easier to pass on them. So like, if I don't expect Chubb to go super crazy on Seattle, because our run defense is pretty solid, but our pass defense is more questionable, especially like short gainers and stuff like that.
Who took over the Earl Thomas position as such? I know he was out for most of last year, but like
Earl Thomas. So our defense changed. So last year we played single high all the time with Earl Thomas, right? And then when Earl left, we tried to play some single high, but it didn't really work. So now we play 2 high safeties, and it's Tedrick Thompson is the other starting safety. If I had to describe Tedrick Thompson, I would say he's among the most average football players I've scouted. But in college, he was like a real ball hawk. And then last week we saw that like excellent fingertip interception that he tipped up to himself. That was Tedrick. And I think that he might be like turning a corner a little bit, because in college he led the nation in passes defensed in his senior year. So he obviously has the ability to like get after balls and do stuff like that. So I'm kind of hoping that he turns a corner, but thus far in the NFL, he's really looked like a guy who's been told over and over to like not make any mistakes, don't give up the big play, and that has come at the expense of him not being much of a playmaker. And I'm hoping that kind of turns. Earlier this season, he gave up a really big play, but he almost picked the pass. He just it went through his hands. And I'm thinking that those are like little signs that he might be trying to do it. I have a question that's totally offbeat, but it's something I noticed when I was scouting the Browns. You have like the sweetest punter. Like, I thought our punter was cool, but your punter is also really cool. So like, as a fellow fan of a team that has a really cool punter, our punter is really cool too. He's Australian. His name is Dixon. He like is really good. And your punter's really, really good too. And he has a mullet, right?
Yeah, he's got a full-on flowing, gorgeous blonde.
Just made.
Yeah.
Like, he just looks cool. Like, it just looks like a cool dude. Yeah, and I think that's a big advantage that the Browns have, is their special teams are really, really good.
And Prefer's done a good job.
Yeah, and I think our special teams has been a little shaky because we gave up a couple special teams touchdowns, but I'm expecting ours to kind of turn the corner here in the coming weeks. So that's gonna be fun to watch though. The punt, if it gets low scoring game like you think, the punter battle will be good, because your punter's awesome and our punter's awesome. So that'll be
read my mind. That was actually the question I was going to finish on. I was going to say, how are you going to feel when Michael Dixon isn't going to be the best punter in the field?
I know, it's weird. I was like, wow, this guy's really good. Like, I think he might be better than Dixon. It's weird because Dixon is amazing. He's a really incredible punter, but your punter is special.
We've had him on the podcast, actually. We had Jamie Gillen. He's Scottish, and he's got some ties to Ireland. So us being an Irish Cleveland Browns podcast, we got him on the pod. Going
That's
through
so cool.
the process. Yeah, he's amazing. He's just so down to earth. But obviously, he's got the coolest nickname in all of professional sports. Is the Scottish Hammer. So
that does he enjoy and like football? Because I get the impression from the times I've been around Michael Dixon that he just doesn't even really care that much about football. Like, he's just like, yeah, it's a game, and it's like he just doesn't doesn't even know what's going on when he's not on the field.
I would bet $1 million that if you were to ask Michael Dixon, would you prefer to be a punter in the NFL, or would you love to go back and play AFL, American or Aussie rules football? He'd go, oh yeah, I'd take like a 100% pay cut to go back and play that. Like, I know an awful lot of us Australian guys and stuff like that, and it's they're just a super athletic country. They're very 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 athletic country, between rugby and rugby league and Aussie rules. But yeah, Jamie Gillen is immersed in it. He's out of a small school, Arkansas Pine Bluff, but he would have played semi-professional rugby for quite a while, and he's in Scotland, so he would have been an out half. So kicking was always his game in that, and you can see it, that he knows the trajectory of how to get a ball. I suppose number one, up into the sky and keep it there. I think he's had some crazy hang time on some of his punts of 5 seconds. It's been, and that was one thing that they mentioned, that he gets it up in the sky, but he out kicks his coverage. But he's really adapted really well. And we said in the podcast, I've challenged him to kick a drop goal in a game this year to break that NFL taboo of, I think it's like 60 years or 70 years or something like that since someone's kicked a drop goal in an NFL game. So I've got my money on him to do it this year because having a rugby background, I think he's well capable of it.
Yeah, he is actually his average hang time right now is 4.53 seconds, which is pretty impressive. But the thing that impresses me the most is like he's leading the league in amount of his punts get returned. Only 18.5% of his punts get returned, which is first in the league. And it's like that's what impresses me, is that he puts it in a position where the returner really has no chance. They just like, that's it. The play's over. You get your 45.5 yards. You get all of it because the returner can't do anything. It's awesome.
Yeah. And I know he said he's shanked one or two, all right, but anything that he's done, he's mastered the forward roll on the ball. That's a rugby thing, I think, for him, where he's used to kicking for touch and getting the most out of the ball as it rolls out, because obviously in rugby the ball needs to hit the ground first before it goes out, otherwise the play comes back to the position where the person kicked the ball from. So he's used to that, and here in Ireland we're watching the Rugby World Cup at the moment. Ireland went into the Rugby World Cup as the number one ranked nation in the world, and I would have played rugby for a while as well, so it's kind of something, the dynamics of kicking in rugby, we would be more used to that than the dynamics of kicking in the NFL here. But he's got that down on the forward roll, and he's had the most kicks within 20 yards or something like that as well. He's had
So I have a question. Then, so Rugby World Cup, you brought it up. I'm just going to ask a question. I have a really good friend who's Irish, and he was like despondent after that Japan loss.
Yeah.
Like he was like losing his mind. And I was like, dude, it's group stages. Don't worry. And you guys have turned it around now, right? Looking good.
Well, there's no such thing. Like the group games in the Rugby World Cup are easy. We beat Scotland, who we shouldn't have, or we would have seen as our toughest game. Bit of cockiness came in. Well, I won't say a bit of cockiness. I'd say it was more to do with our climate here in Ireland. Obviously, is very temperate. We don't deal with lots of humidity. We don't deal with lots of heat. And when our sports teams go out into those environments, obviously you're in a tropical, almost a tropical environment, and there's lots of storms over in Japan at the moment. And it was just really humid that day. They couldn't get into the game. They were playing the hosts, who obviously had 90% of the people in the stadium, and that's one thing being Irish. When you go to a World Cup or something, usually 90% of the stadium is shouting for Ireland because people love us. But when they were playing against Japan, then there was a different dichotomy, and I suppose that will lift the Japanese team. But the Japanese were no pushovers, no. And I think the Irish public were probably a small bit more confident than the team were in that instance. But yeah, to kind of answer the question, we can still finish top of the group provided they don't cancel those games, beat Samoa by bonus point, and no one can really touch us. But it'll be interesting to see how far they go, because at the start we would have fancied winning the whole thing.
And you're much better than America. How about that? Our team is not good.
There's probably, I think there's like 3 Irish guys playing on the American team for the US at the moment as well. So it's it's very seldom that we get to farm our players out to other nations. Usually we take them in from other nations to our team. But we'll but the game is growing in the States, and there's going to be a new kind of like a Major League Rugby. I think it's starting up over there, and they've got some big names coming to play, some big French names, some big New Zealand names and stuff. So there's actually talks that there would be a East Coast based team would play in the European League, just to build up the kind of game in the States. And
it's like the reverse of the London game.
Exactly.
Which is like brought football over to the UK, which is I think it's been a big thing because like our UK Seahawkers, like that's like they have a good podcast, and they do a really good job. And I think that like those that thing has been really cool, I think, for the NFL and for American football fans. In Europe.
Exactly.
All right.
Well,
anything else?
No, that's been really good. It's been really, really insightful. Thank you so much for coming on. As I said, before we finish up, what would your prediction be? I know you mentioned a couple of numbers there. Are you going to stick to a steadfast prediction?
I'm going to stick to my guns. I'm going to go 33-27. I think the Seahawks, I think it comes down to like an important turnover or something like that. Okay. And if I had to guess which team is more likely to give up an important turnover, I would bet against Russell. I wouldn't bet against Russell Wilson. Yeah. So Russell Wilson, it takes good care of the football, but it's going to be close. And I wouldn't, like I said, I would not surprise. I do this thing on my podcast I call the 4 corners, where it's just like, do I think the Browns win big, the Browns slightly win, the Seahawks slightly win, and the Seahawks big win? And I kind of think about like which of those 4 results is most likely. And I think the close wins are much more likely than the big wins this week. I think one team's going to win a close one way or the other, because these teams aren't as far apart as like DVOA would make you think. Like right now the Seahawks are 9th and Cleveland is, I think, 26th, and I just don't think the talent level of Cleveland is way too high to be 26th in DVOA. Like they were below the Giants going into tonight's game. That's ridiculous to me. That's not the case.
I had an impassioned speech with my with the other half of this podcast as well about statistical analysis and stuff like that after 5 games, especially when some teams have had buys and so on. And I'm not quite there with the ranking of teams after 4 or 5 games, because you can have anomalies. Like I think the 49ers game was an anomaly, and the effect that one poor game would have. But yeah, as you said, the DVOA doesn't equate to kind of the closeness of these two teams, I suppose, from those type of levels. But yeah, it's interesting. It certainly is. And as I say, your game is going to be an awful lot more interesting to watch than my game anyway. The game that I have in my mind for
the close game. Yeah, that's
exactly.
I mean, I like points, so I'm going to root for points. And the Seahawks offense is good, so I just think they can bust out. They seem to be able to get going this year and score.
Good stuff. So listen, thanks so much, Nathan, for taking the time to chat to us. That's been a really, really insightful chat. As I say, I now know way more about the Seahawks than I did beforehand. So thank you so much for that. Do you want to plug anything that you've got going on? You maybe plug your Twitter, plug the podcast and so on.
I mean, if you decide you want to listen to a podcast about the Seahawks, you can find us at Seahawks Nest on Twitter, or we're on everything: SoundCloud, Stitcher, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts. We're out there doing our thing. And yeah, that's it. I mean, I'm assuming everyone who listens to this is a diehard Browns fan, and that ad right there was just like completely worthless. But
you'd be surprised. You know.
But you could root for an NFC team and an AFC team, right? And then if they meet in the Super Bowl, you could just like be like, okay, I really like the Browns though.
Yeah, there's being Irish and stuff like that. We do kind of tend to see that sometimes people who interact with us are fans of all different teams, but they've got, like, they might say, because the Browns are in the media an awful lot, it's like, oh, the Browns are pretty interesting. We'll listen to this podcast from time to time to see what's going on. Then if their team is playing against the Browns, we tend to get an awful lot of Irish fans and so on that listen in. So it's never a wasted advert, because it's getting pretty popular here in Ireland. There's quite a lot of, like, if you go to any pub, they'll probably have on a Sunday night, they'll probably have Sky Sports showing the NFL, and you'll have the bones of 20 to 25 people in there. Like, we have a Galway Browns backers club here. I mentioned it to you before we come on, and like, we regularly have 16 Browns fans.
My friend Paul, my Irish friend Paul, he's like, he loves the football when they're playing, but he hates how many advertisements there are. It drives him nuts. He's like, I cannot handle all these adverts. I'm like losing my mind. And I'm like, I don't blame you. It's a lot of advertisements. Yeah. It's weird. That's why. So conspiracy time. I love to do conspiracies. Do you think that pass interference rule, the new one where they can review it, do you think that was so they could sneak us a few more advertisements?
That is a great call. Never crossed my mind. Crossed my mind.
It's the only thing I could think of, man.
You're watching too much Mad Men. That's what you're
It's like, we got to get another ad in here for Bud Light Platinum. It's like, this terrible beer no one wants to drink.
We'll tell everybody that we're speeding up the game, but we'll still keep the same amount of adverts. That's a great call. Great call.
All right. Thank you,
man. So,
Nathan,
thanks so much once again for coming on, and thanks to everybody for listening. As always, you can get this podcast on anywhere we get podcasts: Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, so on. Anybody out there who wants to give us a 5-star rating, it would be really, really appreciated. Any interaction at all, you can find us on @2greenbrowns on Twitter. You can find me at Jim Custard, and my co-host John is at JohnCahill_IRL. Once again, thank you so much to Nathan. I look forward to a really, really great game at the weekend, and maybe a redemption game for the Cleveland Browns, for Freddie Kitchens, and for Baker Mayfield. So all that's really left to say is that, I hope we come out on the right-hand side. I hope we win, and to go Brownies.